All right, everybody, welcome to the Retro Gamers Podcast, episode 155. It's great to be back and with you here, and as you can plainly see, my other half, Larry Mormon, is not with us this week. He decided to go party it up in Brooklyn. Not exactly sure what happened, but considering the fact that I was out a couple of weeks ago, it's only fair. Meanwhile, we have a special guest sitting in for Larry, one of our go-to guys, host of the Yin and Yang Podcast, and one of my closest friends, Mr. Anthony Chu. And what's going on?
Your co-host this week just got sexier. Slimmer, better looking.
Oh man, and I'm sure Larry will be happy to hear that. Yeah, I know, man. You've been.
I hope he does hear that because I get on his case all the time on my show.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just gonna say, you want to tell everybody briefly about the Yin and Yang Podcast and what it's about?
Yeah, absolutely. The Yin and Yang Podcast drops generally every Friday. Possibly we're thinking about moving into Saturdays, and what we really do talk about is we try our best to talk about martial arts, which is pretty difficult because martial arts is very physical, it's very visual at the same time, but we do talk a lot about the content of it, and it can be a broad spectrum of movies, television, video games are included as well, if it arises and things like that, but also connected to it, and they go hand in hand, which is health, fitness, motivation. And I think that seems to be what our listeners want us to gear more towards, believe it or not. So after episode 100, I may have to do some revamping. So, and a little bit of a change of the show. So by all means, please listen, everybody.
Yeah, and it's an excellent show. I mean, health and fitness I know is very important to you. It's very important to me as well. And not only that, you've been on quite a journey over the past year because, where did you start at in terms of weight-wise, and tell everybody where you are now, because I think it's nothing short of amazing in terms of what you've been doing.
So I started this January 2016. So I've been doing this for well over 3 years, and I started at 270 pounds. I was very, very unhealthy, out of shape. Just, you know what it was? I was thinking about this, excuse me, in retrospect, and I was saying to myself that I think that I was at a point where I was sad because I ate, and I ate because I was sad. Mm-hmm. And 3 years later, after having my coach is actually somebody I work with. So we have a gym at my job, which is great. And then afterwards, like three and a half years later, I would say I went down from 270 to currently right now I weigh in at 196 and a half.
Wow.
So it's like almost 4.5 pounds.
That is absolutely insane. And it's fantastic because you've actually done that journey in a very natural way. It was just through diet and exercise.
Yes, sir.
Done it, which is, and I can't tell you how proud I am of you for achieving something like that, because I know that was something I know it's something you've always struggled with, and it's just an absolutely amazing thing. And to not only that, over the last year or so, you've been cataloging that on the Yin and Yang Podcast, which is also really cool.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, and I'm really humbled to hear that, Ant, because quite frankly, it's been a very difficult journey. And I've gotten also, it's interesting because I've gotten a lot of flack by a lot of people saying to me, well, how come it took you so long to drop 74 and a half pounds. And I said to them, I said, well, you have to understand something. I'm not doing this based upon any cheats. In other words, there's no diets, pills, powders, meaning crash diets and things like that. I don't do fad diets. Mm-hmm. I don't take any type of I don't take anything that, you'd see a lot of I don't know. I'm not saying anything about bodybuilders or people who take human growth hormone or pills and powders. I just don't do that type of thing. I want to do it as naturally as possible so that when the end result comes, I don't have excuses and I can't say, well, something helped me enhance the progress. Yeah.
Well, and not only that, you have all the tools you need to keep the weight off because you've already settled into a routine of healthy eating.
Right.
You're not relying on anything else, which is fantastic.
just pardon the 2 scoops of ice cream I had today at this birthday party I went to.
Dude, that, and you know what though? That's okay. You can allow yourself that
Right.
because you know you're just going to get right back on it, which is great. So yeah, so I think that's absolutely fantastic. Again, I can't congratulate you enough. But
Right.
this being the Retro Gamers podcast, as everybody
Yes,
knows,
sir.
for those of you who haven't heard Anthony on the show before, Anthony and I go way back. Like we go back like 6-year-old Anthony, 8-year-old Anthony.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable. Now
we
we're
go really far back.
40-something-year-old Anthony's.
Yeah, I go now. Yeah, I go now. Now we're midlife crisis Anthony's. We're
Right,
all dealing with
exactly.
that.
Exactly.
But when we were growing up, one of the things we always did was we played video games. It was one of our things.
Absolutely. Huge part of our lives. This is, I mean, we grew up, you know what? It's interesting. And I was talking to some of my listeners, about, and a lot of people, listen from around the nation. Some people listen around the world. And I try to say to them that, our generation was that very last generation that grew up in like old world Brooklyn, New York.
Hmm.
We lived in that very last remnants of what Brooklyn used to be in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And then it started dying out rapidly in the 80s. And then by the 90s, it was completely gone. And especially with all the changes now, Brooklyn is not a place where it had a certain culture or a sense of community or a certain pride. It's more so a place where people live and commuted. And, we lived in a world where when we grew up, we don't have cell phones, we don't have laptops, we don't have things like that. So retro gaming, and this is the point here, is that retro gaming is such an integral part of our upbringing and our lives that I don't think that I could have conceived of my life without it, to be very
Yeah.
honest with you. I mean, it was just looking back in retrospect, all these games it brings me back to a phenomenal time in my life. And I'm sure in your life as well. And this is what I love so much about the retro gamers listening to this podcast is that, how like a lot of people say that when they listen to something that makes them feel old.
Hmm.
When I listen to something like this, like a show like this, and actually the retro game should be the only retro video gaming show that you should be listening to, ladies and gentlemen, is the idea that it brings me to a simpler time in my life where I didn't have bills, I didn't have anything, no responsibilities, and it was just study hard, play video games. It's as
Hmm.
simple as that, right? So, I mean, it just brings me back some great nostalgia.
Yeah, no, and and we, like you said, we were the generation that started to grow up
Mhm.
in this tech-driven world. It
Exactly.
started computers, video games, eventually cell phones, the internet, and all that stuff. We grew up learning those things while we were still doing what kids did back then, which were going out playing outside and
Exactly.
and doing stuff like that.
Exactly.
So like we kind of got the best of both worlds, and I'm always very grateful for that. Um, but so when I was thinking about a topic for us to discuss today, you guys had talked a weeks ago when I was actually out because of my surgery. You had filled in for me as well, um, and you guys were celebrating the 130th anniversary of Nintendo. The company turned 130 years old,
Yes.
which is insane. It's been around since 1889. Obviously, not a video game company in the beginning, morphed
Right.
into it later. But I thought what would be a good thing for us to do today, since the original NES was probably the biggest part of our childhood because we used to play it all the time, was
Absolutely.
that I thought it would be a good idea to talk about our own personal top 10 NES games for us. So not
Oh,
we're not talking top 10 all time, we're not talking top 10 in sales and things like that. These are our own personal favorites that
right.
we had growing up that we hold fondest. So
Exactly.
it's not going to be one of those ones where it's not going to be one of those ones where it's going to be a list everybody is going to agree with because it's incredibly biased on both of our parts. And Anthony and I both came up with our own separate lists.
Right. Absolutely.
And we don't know what each other has. Um, so what we'll do
Scout's honor.
is, yeah, Scout's honor. I have no idea what's on his list. He has no idea what's on mine.
Hmm.
And what we're going to do is Anthony's going to go through his top 10 and then I'll go through my top 10. However, if he points anything out that I have on my list, I will also share where I have that game on
Okay.
the list.
That's fair enough. Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, so I think at this point, Ant, I know you had mentioned before we started recording that you had a couple of honorable mentions because look, there were over 800 titles on the NES. It's hard to whittle it down to just 10.
When you proposed this topic to me, I really looked at myself and I said, "Is he kidding?" Because it's just, again, you had said there's over 800 titles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so hard to narrow down just 10 out of 800 because then now you're saying to yourself, holy smokes, well, should this be there? Should that be there? Now, I will say something about my list, okay? I have, and you've known this about me since we were children, I have always been a massive fan of contact sports, any type of action violence. Yes, I do condone it, only in the video gaming world, please. All right. And so my list is kind of biased, but it is my personal list. I mean, I stuck true to exactly the way that you wanted the content to be. So,
all right, awesome. So,
yes,
so then before we jump into our top 10,
Mm-hmm.
I know you said you had a couple honorable mentions, which would I guess be 11 and 12.
Yes, sir.
I actually did have one honorable mention. I erased it from my list because I was just going to do my 10. But since you have honorable mentions, I'll throw in an extra in there. So you hit these up.
Okay. So one of the honorable mentions that I want to put out there for the listeners here and the viewership is, fans, you may or may not agree with me on this one. It's an enjoyable game, but it didn't make my top 10 because I liked it, never owned it, but I think I had come over your house, and I remember I had a friend named Adam. I used to go over his house to play it, Ghosts and Goblins.
Oh yeah, Ghosts and Goblins, one of the hardest games ever made, in my opinion.
Think that was the problem.
Yeah,
I think that I mean, my friend Adam was a genius at it. Not for me, just not for me.
Yeah, I think in the eternity that I owned that game, because I did own that game when I was.
Oh, did you really? Okay.
Yeah, I think the farthest I ever got was level 2.
Oh, gee, what?
Yeah, I never stuck with the game long enough to try and beat it because I would throw my hands up and be like, all right, this is just impossible.
I don't even remember the premise of that game. Do you?
Yeah, I remember you had to save your. I know you had to save your girlfriend who got kidnapped. I mean, it was a lot of. I believe they were all like similar games back then, and it was a 2D side scroller. It was very popular in the arcade before it came over to console.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, what Ghosts and Goblins is most known for is its difficulty level. It is absolutely brutal. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I just. Just not a thing for me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, it's probably the only game in the world where when you get hit by a zombie or a bad guy or something like that, you lose your suit of armor and run around in your underwear. I've never heard of a zombie. I never heard of a zombie ripping off your armor when they hit you. But hey, or or a ghost weird. Or whatever, or a goblin.
Exactly.
Yeah. But definitely, but still, it's a very enjoyable game. It's a very difficult game. So
very much so.
Yeah. So if you haven't ever played it, you don't have to take our word for it. You can give it a shot and see what happens. So
yep, absolutely. And I would say number 11 for me, as an honorable mention, and a lot of people are not going to be happy about this, is Metroid.
Oh, Metroid.
You know what? I like the game. I like the premise of it. Metroid was this. It was kind of like this intergalactic. I guess you can kind of say there's like a space suit guy who was just shooting stuff up to try to get to like a. Was he trying to get to a ship?
He was trying to know. He was ultimately trying to defeat Mother Brain. But what you're
yeah.
What you're forgetting about it wasn't a spacesuit guy. It was a spacesuit woman, because that was the twist at the end of the game. Once you defeated the game,
wait, what?
Yeah, once you defeated the game,
I never defeated the game, so I don't know.
Right, once you defeated the game, Samus took off her helmet and revealed that she was a woman.
Oh my god! Wow.
And you were this years old when you learned that.
No.
Yeah,
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's one of the most well-known twists in video game history.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And a very
Wow.
good and a very good one at that, by the way, because nobody would ever expect that,
Oh my
you know,
God.
that the lead in the game was a woman. But again, I mean, it was still a badass game. It was an awesome game
Holy
to play through.
smokes.
Again, it was like a 2D side scrolling.
Holy smokes.
It was a
My
2D side
mind is
scrolling
blown.
open world. Well, hey, that's what this show is for. This show is to educate you and surprise you at times. So
I am going to go. You know what I'm going to do now? After we record this, I'm going to put on my NES Classic and I'm playing it. And
okay.
I am going to play it until I beat the freaking thing. Okay? Because oh man.
Fair
No
enough.
way. My
Yeah.
childhood has just been altered.
Well, I
Woo.
mean, you make it
Okay.
sound like you make it sound like it's such a monumental thing. I just think it was a cool surprise.
Oh,
And
no,
then
no, no.
yeah, but
It's monumental for me because as a kid, and I'm going back into the perspective or having flashbacks when I was a kid and thinking of that time, you would have never thought that. You know what I mean? Hey, look, I'm not being, I'm not trying to say that the hero cannot be female. It's just that in the 1980s, when you had seen something like this, or I mean, it would just, you would have never thought that the ironic twist would have been that ever. And I've never beaten the game, so I wouldn't know. But I'm gonna try tonight.
All
I'll
right.
tell you that much right now. Okay. All right. So, do I continue?
Yeah, no, continue. Now we're going into your top 10, right?
Okay. So I'm gonna put another quarter into the slot, and I'm going to continue.
Well, it's the
And
NES, so we're gonna put the cartridge in the system. How about that?
sure, let's exchange the cartridge and put a new one in there
Yeah.
because number 10 for me is Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong.
All
Okay.
right.
Hard to top the original. It is not, strangely enough, not on my list.
Okay, but can I say this? Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr.
Mm.
I mean, can I say both, or does that? I mean, can that count as
Hey,
one, or should I just pick one or the other?
These are our rules. We can do what we want. If you want to say both, you can say both.
Okay, now
They are kind of different. They're a little bit different, but not enough.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. I remember and I recalled something that Larry had said during the episode of Nintendo's 130th anniversary, was that apparently originally Donkey Kong was not supposed to be a gorilla, ape.
No. The original.
Apparently, he was Popeye.
Yeah, the original game was actually supposed to be Popeye, and it was supposed to be
Wow.
instead of Mario, which was again Donkey Kong. It was Jumpman, right? Mario was originally Jumpman.
Yes,
but
yes.
Popeye was supposed to go up to the top and save olive oil from Bluto. Donkey Kong was supposed to be Bluto, but Nintendo didn't have the license to use Popeye. They didn't get the license.
Figure it was that, yeah.
Right. But they still wanted to make the game. So basically, they just swapped out all the characters for Jumpman, who became Mario, Donkey Kong, who they created, and then Daisy. So you had all three of those characters created for a game, and again, at least two of, and Daisy has become well known as well, but three of the most iconic characters in Nintendo's catalog.
Absolutely.
More Jumpman and Donkey Kong. But yeah, and the game obviously has been one of the most celebrated games in video game history, to the point where it's constantly the Guinness World Records is constantly being challenged for Donkey Kong. And there's a reason for that. Yeah, there's a reason for that, between the arcade and the NES port. And the NES port, I thought, was very good. I want to say that I'm trying to remember if the NES port had all three levels. I don't think it did. I think it just had two, because it couldn't fit the third level.
In your mind, which one is better? Was it the arcade version of Donkey Kong or the NES version?
In my personal opinion, I think the arcade version was better.
I agree 100%.
Right, but I mean, the NES game was nothing to slouch at, so I completely understand why it made it to your list. And then, of course, Donkey Kong Jr. coming off the heels of a successful Donkey Kong, that was an equally fun game, and it was also kind of fun to see the roles reversed, where Mario or Jumpman was the actual villain in the game this time around.
Yeah, which is the ironic twist that I remember when I first saw that in Donkey Kong Jr. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Plus, Donkey Kong Jr. got to run around in a little diaper.
That's true too. Oh, that was kind of cool, man.
It was fun.
All
So
right.
yeah, that's a very good. All right, so that's a good number 10 for you.
Yes, sir. So number 9 for me is actually Excite Bike.
Oh
Excite
wow.
Bike was one of my absolute favorites because it's one of those what do you call it when the direction is going this way?
Side scrolling.
Side scrolling. Is that what it is? Okay. So it was more or less a side scrolling game.
Hmm.
Was it not? I
Yeah,
mean,
it was
because
kind of it was kind of a
right,
side scrolling sports game in a way,
right.
if you were to
Now,
categorize it.
it's a great game, but here's the thing. I gave it number 9 because for me, the excitement level of it doesn't really live up to its name of Excite Bike. Because after a certain point, with this game, I can only play it. I mean, back then and even now on the classic, I can still play it up to a degree. And then I say to myself, okay, where do we go from here?
Hmm.
And and again, I'm being a little biased because maybe, we're of a different age now, but at that time as a kid, even I kind of looked at myself and just said, okay, there's a certain point where I just, this is kind of boring to me now, but don't get me wrong. Phenomenal game. It is definitely has its following and all that,
Yeah.
Um,
Well, did you used to create your own levels because there was an option in the game to create your own levels with obstacles? That was the idea behind making it more, just making it the replay value, bringing up the replay.
I think that we tried that at one point, but I did not anywhere beyond that. No, I really just played exactly what was there, and then even after that, I just kind of looked at it like, okay, let's move on now.
No, understandable. I mean, for what it was, though, I think it was a really cool game. It was definitely fun. It introduced kids to a world of dirt biking,
Mm,
which they may not have been, may not have known anything about. And granted, it was an 8-bit game, so the
mm.
graphics are obviously simplistic. But it was really fun. It was great to compete against your friends in it. And if you did like to create your own obstacle courses, it was equally as fun because you can make a course any way that you want. So it was always going to be different.
Wasn't there after Excite Bike came out? Wasn't there a game in the arcade that was exactly the same premise, side scrolling, that had in the arcade you had a steering wheel? It was kind of like one of those like those 4x4 or those like
You're thinking of Super Off Road.
is it Super Off Road?
Yeah, Super Off Road were like it was like the four wheelers.
Yeah, yeah, and then
Hmm.
you had a steering wheel in the
Yeah,
in
and
the
you
arcade,
you had a steering wheel. It was kind of an overhead track that you did.
right? And I mean, so did that have any influence you think from Excite Bike?
It's quite possible it did. I mean, it was just another version of that. I can't say for sure,
Okay,
but I wouldn't rule it out.
right, exactly. Okay, so number 8 is actually one of my favorites. I haven't played it in so long, and I should play it. Is Bubble Bobble.
Bubble Bobble. Wow. All right, that was a nice name.
I mean, listen, folks, if you have not played Bubble Bobble, you haven't lived in the retro video gaming world. I mean, you got to play it at least once, okay? I haven't played it in years. Years I have not played it, right?
Yeah, and Bubble Bobble is one of those games. It was also originally an arcade game, and
Yes.
basically you were
Yes.
playing as I don't even know what you call these guys. I used to call them little dragons. You were either a green or I want to say a green or a pink dragon, if I'm not
Right,
mistaken.
exactly. I think
Um,
or was it green and blue?
it might have been green and blue.
Okay.
But the idea behind the game was you had monsters come in on the levels. It was like a puzzle game, and when the
Mhm.
monsters were coming down, you had to shoot them with a bubble to trap them in the bubble, and then you had to jump and hit the bubble to knock them out of the board. And
Right.
once you eliminated all the monsters from the board, you moved on to another level. Yeah, I mean, again, it was one of those games where it was super fun. It was definitely challenging, especially as you moved on to later levels.
Right.
It's a game I'm positive I never beat because you remember back then, arcade games were not meant to be beaten. The idea was to keep pumping quarters in, so they would make them really difficult. So
Right.
even when they translated them to the NES, it would be equally as difficult.
Do you know where I first played Bubble Bobble? This will blow
Uh,
your mind.
Pronto Pizza?
Nope.
No.
Think about it this way. Bay Parkway,
Bay Parkway.
What was in Bay Parkway that was a
Chuck E.
mass arcade?
Cheese. Was it Chuck E.
Yes,
Cheese?
Chuck E. Cheese, baby.
Wow.
I played that game in there for the first time. Oh man, I must have spent at least $1.50, $2 worth. And that was a lot of
and back then that was a lot of your change, man.
That was a lot of change, man. That was at least, I would say, 2/5 of my change.
Wow.
Going in there, because I remember I would get an allowance, and my dad would always give me like $5 a week or something like that. And I would just save that and save that and save that. And then I remember the second I got to Bubble Bobble at Chuck E. Cheese, I ran to that thing, and I would just put down my quarters on the screen just to say, "Listen, folks, go away. I'm going to be here for a little while." You remember that, right?
Oh yeah, no, we used to do that all the time. You would put your quarter on.
Right. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who have never ever seen something like this, and I realize we're talking about NES here, but really quickly here, for those of you who never lived back in the day, and if you are, maybe this will be a good reminiscing, and I don't know what it was like for the rest of the country, but in New York, the way that you would indicate how long somebody would be on that machine is how many quarters that they put on the screen, right? So if you got a lot of quarters stacked up, come back.
Yeah.
And and it was just interesting. It was not a world where people would steal your quarters. It was not, people would not try to bump you out of the way, or people would really respect your time, and you just come back, because they can't be playing forever. You know that. So there you go. So Bubble Ball. Oh man. Okay. My friends, number 7. All I have to say is one code word. All right. Up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start.
Yeah.
So for those of you who do not know exactly what I'm talking about, number 7, my friends, is Contra.
Contra was my honorable mention, actually.
Really?
Yeah. It almost made my top 10.
Oh, man. Contra, once you hit that code before the credits start, you had 30 lives. And it was the only game that my older brother and I can actually beat because it was a co-op, right? Yeah. It was a co-op. We could play it together. And by the way, the 2 characters, do you know who they were supposed to be?
Once upon a time, I probably did, but it is not coming back to me at the moment.
I kid you not. Sylvester Stallone and Arnold
Schwarzenegger. That's not surprising. I mean, they were the action stars of the 80s.
Right. And now Contra came out in what, 88? 89?
I thought 87.
87?
I think.
So let me ask you this. Was that the inspiration for the movie Predator? Or did Predator come out first and then Contra came out?
No, Predator came out before that.
They do have a correlation. I do know that for a fact. So Predator came out first, the movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Predator came
out
then
first. I think that this is what influenced, the video game. Because I remember, I think the developer of the movie had said that at one point. Something like that.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes a great deal of sense. But, I mean, for anybody who plays video games, if you haven't played Contra, you're missing out on one of the most classic video games of all time.
What's your favorite gun?
What's my favorite gun? Oh, the spread gun, of course.
Yeah. Dude, nobody used no damn machine gun. Nobody used that pellet gun. That looked like
fire gun.
Yeah, come on. I mean, well, the fire gun wasn't bad, but it was not as effective. Spread. Once you saw that come in, forget it. And then once you also got the invincibility wing for a short amount of time, you mauled people, man.
Yep.
Well,
what I also liked about the game is that they used to cut between you had a side scrolling board, and then you kind of had that almost that third person perspective.
Yes.
Which was really cool. And if you played it in the arcade, you actually got cutscenes in the game, which did not make it to the NES version.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah, they had cutscenes in it. And if you own the Japanese Famicom version, the Famicom version also has cutscenes. If you buy the the Contra Anniversary Collection that just recently came out, they also included the version with the cutscenes in there, so you can actually see.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Interesting thing about Famicom, did they have the same code? as we did in the United
I
States?
believe, yeah, the Konami code I think was synonymous with with a few Konami games, and it was across the board.
Now, could you do the code during the arcade? Because I've never played it in the arcade.
I would assume you can't because they would want your quarters. So,
I thought figure maybe somebody might have had a glitch or something, you know?
no, doubtful.
Okay. All right. So number 6 for all you basketball fans, Konami's Double Dribble.
Oh, Double Dribble, man! I used to play that all the time too.
Dribble, and you're not a fan of basketball, right?
No, I'm not a fan of basketball, but Double Dribble was one of those games I always played, though.
Yes, but because I've never seen a graphic on screen where you literally do a reverse jam, like double hand jam, and you break the backboard. Remember that?
Oh yeah, that used to be fun.
That was the most prolific, and I guess the highlight of the game is when you did score like that and it broke the rim and the glass in the rim. Oh man.
Yeah, it was a little nuanced thing for the game that really made it worthwhile. So yeah, I remember, and one of the reasons why I liked playing games like that, like sports games in general, when I would play them, because I wasn't a big sports fan growing up. It was just, again, it was the idea of you were able to play it with your friends. So you do a 2-player game, you play against your friends. And that's what was fun about it. Right. So I can understand that making your list. What I find very surprising at this point now is you have gone through, the bottom half of your list, and we have not hit the same games yet, which I find interesting. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna switch. We're gonna switch over to me. Okay. I'm gonna give you my numbers 6 through 10, and then we're gonna take a little break and come back for our top 5s. So for me now, again, as I said earlier, these are the games that we remember most fondly and that we consider our top 10. Personal, not what is the most technologically advanced or what do we think is influential. These were ours. And also, one of the rules that I made for my own self is that I didn't repeat any games on my list from a franchise. So, for example, if I picked a Mario game, I only picked one. So, something to consider on my list. And so, with my top 10, number 10, and again, it was always hard to figure out. Like 10 and 11 were almost interchangeable, and Contra was the one that fell to 11 on my list. But number 10 for me was, again, originally from the arcade, but such an awesome game to play, Gauntlet.
Wow.
You remember playing Gauntlet?
No, I remember playing it, but I didn't even think of Gauntlet, believe it or not.
No, Gauntlet was just one of those games where it's like, it was a top-down, basically every level was a maze or a room that you had to get through.
Yes.
And what I loved about it was I loved the fantasy element to it. You had 4 characters to choose from. It was the warrior, the Valkyrie, the wizard, and the elf. And you had to get through the board and find the exit to get to the next board. And there were 100 levels. So trying to get through this game was a Herculean task, to say the least.
Exactly.
And my personal favorite, I always loved playing as the elf because he was so fast, even though he was the weakest of the bunch. He was just super fast. Do you remember which person you like to play?
My man, the wizard.
The wizard.
That was my guy, man.
The wizard was great because when he used magic, it was more powerful than anybody else. So he would be able to wipe out the entire board of enemies.
Which is what I like about it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Very useful. Yeah. See, I was always an elf guy, and then second, I would go with Valkyrie because Valkyrie, I think, was the most well-rounded of the 4.
Okay.
So decent strength, decent magic, it worked, and decent speed. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool. But again, Gauntlet, just absolutely. I used to love playing that game and love playing it with friends, which was great. And I don't remember if on the NES, if you had the multiplayer adapter, if you could play 4-player. I know you could play 2. I think it was just 2 players on the NES.
I think so. Yeah. I could be wrong about
I'm not 100% sure. But jumping up to number 9, which was a 4-player game, and a very strange 4-player game. And again, a lot of people aren't going to agree with this game being on the list, but I'll explain the context behind it, which is why which will make sense. But obviously, I was a big movie fan growing up. I'm still a big movie fan now. I work in the entertainment industry. Movies have always been influential to me. And video games based off of films were not always generally well liked. That doesn't mean that there weren't movie games that I got a lot of enjoyment out of. And this was
Right.
by far one of my favorites. In fact, one of two movie games that made it on my list.
Okay.
And I'm talking about horror movie based Nightmare on Elm Street for the NES.
Wow, that was a good game.
I loved that game. I absolutely loved that game. One of the main reasons why is, for one, it was loosely based off of one of my favorite Nightmare on Elm Streets, which was Part 3, Dream Warriors. And one of the main story elements in that film was that when the kids would go to sleep, they would have some type of superpower. You know, one of them was athletic, one of them was a wizard, one of them was super strong and stuff like that. And they transferred some of those characters over to the game. So in other words, like, it was a side-scrolling game. The object was you had to collect all of Freddy's bones so that you can destroy him in the furnace of the boiler room. But as you're trying to do this, you fall asleep, Freddy comes after you, you have to fight him, and then eventually at the end of the game, you have to fight every form of Freddy Krueger, and then you finally fight him, and when you defeat him, you win the game. Just, to me, it was just a really fun game. When you would fall asleep, you would become 3 different characters. You either became a javelin thrower, so an athlete, a wizard who would shoot like these magic fireballs or whatever they were, or a ninja that would shoot stars and he would do this jump kick in the air, which was very useful for certain enemies. And the coolest thing about this is that you could play with 4 people. You can bring 3 friends over. Everybody got to play a different character, and you all got to fight Freddy together if you wanted to. It was really, really fun.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Because at that time, it was only individually or 2 people. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. So it was also kind of an interesting game. It was probably a little bit cumbersome to play with 4 because that was a lot of characters to have on the screen at once. But for 2 players, I thought it was definitely a sweet spot for that. Still,
yeah.
I have a lot of great memories playing that with my friends, mostly because Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite horror movie franchise of all time.
It's mine as well, yeah.
Yep, I grew up on it. I was very happy I got to play a video game, with Freddy Krueger in it. Of course, years and years and years later, he popped up in Mortal Kombat, which was also awesome. I think it was Mortal Kombat, yeah. And Soul Calibur, I think, at some point. So really? It's just really, yeah, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. But Nightmare on Elm Street was definitely one of my favorite games growing up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay.
All right, jumping to number 8. And I have a feeling this game may be in your top 5, unless you didn't think of it. Okay. But we're talking about, it's a sports game. And it is by far the best sports game, in my opinion, that ever came out on the Nintendo. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. I'm sure
it's funny. It's funny that. Do you want to know what the placement was for me?
No, we can go to it later if you want.
Okay. All right. It's on there. Let's just put it that way.
All right. So, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it now. So Mike Tyson's Punch-Out again. It was it's one of the most memorable games. I'm sure most people who are listening or watching have heard of it. But you played a character named Little Mac, right. And you had to beat all these other characters, all these other boxers to lead up to a bout with Mike Tyson. Right. And every boxer had their weakness you needed to figure out. Right. Glass Joe had a glass jaw, and then an armwood and armwood. And once you figured those things out, you were able to beat. You could beat them easily, so you can move on. And then Mike Tyson was like a bear to beat. He was super hard.
Well, I mean, also it was the game itself was also very stereotypically racist.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
Okay. I mean, when you look at it like this, there you had, like, let's say, what the hell was that guy's name? Piston Honda. Mm-hmm. He had really slanted eyes. He looked like this evil guy, who basically was just like very sneaky. It was, and you could clearly tell he's a bad guy. I mean, then you had like this. Then you had the Spanish fighter. What was it? Don Flamenco. Right, who basically had a rose in his mouth. He's dancing like he's in he's dancing like a matador, mm-hmm. And he's angry. That's stereotypical. I mean, what was that other guy's name? Something Tiger,
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about? The one that does magic.
was it Glass Tiger?
No, no, no.
No,
It was something tiger.
I
And
forgot. Yeah.
basically, yeah, like he's wearing a turban.
Hmm.
And he's also, like he does magic, and he's, he has he's wearing like a leopard
Yeah.
skin, type of, like, it's just, like there was that, but then also, as weird as it is, all right, you also have Mario as the referee,
Yep.
all right.
Yep.
I mean, let's
Mario
not
made
forget
his
that.
appearance in the game. Yep.
Right. Oh yeah, the Russian guys are drunk. Soda
Yes.
Popinski is a
Yep.
drunk, right? Who's
Well,
pink.
no, he drink.
He's
No, he
pink,
he
dude.
drinks. No, no, no. Soda Popinski drinks soda pop.
Right, but the original premise of it was that it's alcohol. I mean, it's
Yeah.
referenced to be
Well, I
alcohol.
mean, the
I'll
bottom line
beat you
is,
if you're
yeah,
punch drunk. You
they
know?
did they did play on stereotypes, but it didn't make it any less of an enjoyable
Oh
game.
no, oh no. I mean, and also it's like it's a clear cut ripoff of Rocky
Hmm.
because it's an underdog fighter who's smaller than everybody else, who knows he's not the caliber fighter that you would expect him to be in the ring with these professionals, like these big guys, and he has to overcome the odds.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, and
Well, if you think about if you think about it this way though, if he was a super powerful fighter, it wouldn't have been as enjoyable a story. If he
right,
can just take everybody out
exactly,
easily. So that, but that
exactly.
again, but that was the appeal of it, and that's what I enjoyed about it.
Did
Uh,
you use the codes?
Always.
Did you really?
Yeah, but no, no, no. I used the codes after I made it to that point. It would give you a code after you beat certain
Right.
champions.
It
Remember?
would. It would tell you the code exactly. But see, I actually kind of enjoy the process of beating the daylights out of these people.
Yeah, no, it was really fun. I mean, there,
You know?
obviously there were some really challenging ones, like Ball Bull. I used to always have a problem with when he would charge.
Oh, I hate that guy.
Yeah, especially when you fought him the second time. That drove me nuts.
Yeah, he was horrible the second time.
And then, and
King
then,
Hippo.
King Hippo, I never really had a problem with. He was fine.
I couldn't figure out the pattern. That's what.
Yeah, I got the pattern on him. Super Macho Man would be really hard because you never knew how many tornado punches he was going to throw, and you had to keep
Sandman.
dodging.
Yep.
Sandman was also complicated,
And then those blinking uppercuts.
Yeah, and then Mike Tyson, of course, was the one where like if he hit you once, you were down.
Mhm.
So it was always it was definitely a challenging game, but again, one of the most memorable ones by far.
Now, let me ask you this: can you actually beat Tyson by knocking him out, or can you
Yeah.
only beat him by split decision?
No, you can knock him out.
Oh, can you really?
Oh yeah, I beat him by
Ah.
knockout.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it just takes a lot of work. All right, number 7. Again, this is my second movie-based game on the list, and again, not the most popular game overall for gamers, but for me, I used to play this game ad nauseum because it was based on one of my favorite films growing up as a kid, and we're talking about The Goonies 2.
Never played that. I have to be honest with you. I never played that.
Yeah, so The Goonies 2 was, and again, the original Goonies game actually came out in Japan. They never released it in the US, which is why when Goonies 2 came out, I thought it was weird because I thought it was a sequel to the movie. Because I'm
Right.
like, oh, there's no Goonies game, so this must be the
Right.
sequel.
Was
Anyway, no, it really
Oh,
wasn't. It was just
wow.
based.
Okay. I
You
did
know, it was
not
just,
realize that.
it was just a
Okay.
video game based off the concept of the Goonies, which to me is one of my favorite movies growing up.
Right. Right.
And it was kind of a side-scrolling open world game, similar to Metroid, where you were running around trying to save your friends who have been captured. So you play as Mikey. You have to save all your other characters. The weird thing about it was at the end, Andy, who was the last one you had to save, was a mermaid. I don't understand why they did that. It was very strange.
Whoa.
But you ran through all these levels. You ran through like underground levels. You ran through all these weird like underwater levels and stuff
Right.
like that. You
Right.
you had to collect different items that would allow you to do certain things. So it was also released by Konami. And so it was a very strange game. But again, for me, to being able to play as Mikey from the Goonies, who was played by Sean Astin in the film, was just a great experience for me. So, and it's one of the games I'll always go back to. Now I can't remember for the life of me how to beat it because it is actually kind of challenging. In terms because you have to find secret doors and things like this and certain items and stuff. So it's definitely a challenge to go back and beat. But I remember beating it as a kid and absolutely loving it.
Okay. All right.
Moving on to number 6. which is to me a really it. I love puzzle games. That was one of the things that I loved growing up with. But this was a different kind of puzzle game. It was more of a not a puzzle game. I'm sorry, point and click adventure game. That's what this game was. And it was actually the first game ever created by LucasArts, which was a video game arm that George Lucas created to create video games. And I'm talking about Maniac Mansion. Do you remember Maniac Mansion?
I remember it. I don't really recall playing it.
Okay.
So
Maniac Mansion was basically it was a point and click adventure, and you picked 3 characters out of the 7 characters they give you an option for. And what these characters do is they go and investigate one of they're going to find Dave, if I remember, Dave's girlfriend who disappeared at this creepy house. And so the 3 people go to the house and they find this really strange family living there that are doing experiments on stuff. And they're a really creepy family. And the idea is you basically clicked around the level to find certain things. You had a list of commands on the bottom of the screen that would tell you, go to, pick up, hit this, so on and so forth. And the object obviously was you uncover the story of what this family was doing while trying to save Dave's girlfriend. And it was just, again, it's what like point and click adventures have become a lot more involved these days, and like with current graphics and stuff like that. And they're really fun and challenging. But LucasArts really made a gem when they made Maniac Mansion because it was just overall fun. It was really fun. It was sarcastic, it's satiric, creepy at times. Just overall like a really fun game. If those were the kind of games that you enjoyed,
right.
So those are my bottom 5.
You know what I remember that game?
What?
I remember coming to your house and you playing it, and me watching you.
Yeah, because it was just an interesting game to watch too. At least I thought it was. I don't know if
right,
other
absolutely.
people did. But it was just a super fun game. I remember nuking the hamster in the microwave. That's one of my fun moments.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, so those are my bottom 5. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Anthony's going to do his top 5. I will do my top 5 if they're not the same. I have a feeling we may have a few of the same ones on there, but we'll find out.
I think so too.
Yeah, but we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
You got it. All right.
All right, Anthony, it is time for this week's Did You Know segment. And for this week's Did You Know, I wanted to touch on the game I just finished talking about, which was number 6 on my top 10 list of favorite NES games, Maniac Mansion. Now, I know you never played Maniac Mansion, but this is just an interesting little tidbit about the game. So, did you know that Maniac Mansion actually has the first example of product placement in a video game?
I did not know that.
Yeah, now product placement happens all the time now. If you play a racing game, if you play all kinds of games, you'll see product placement in games because video games now are such a lucrative franchise that companies want to advertise in them. However, we're talking about a game that was made in the late 80s. But LucasArts, being a company made by George Lucas decided, it just made sense to get some product placement in there, which was great. So in the game, there is a Pepsi can in the refrigerator and an overall Pepsi machine, like an actual Pepsi vending machine in Dr. Fred's lab. They were originally going to go with Coca-Cola, and LucasArts had reached out to Coca-Cola to do the product placement, but Coca-Cola passed on it because they said, why would we want to do product placement in a video game?
Right.
Pepsi decided to accept it, so we actually got Pepsi in a video game, and Pepsi was the first product to ever have placement inside a video game, which is kind of cool. And that is this week's Did You Know? All right, Ant, we're back, and it is time for you to reveal your top 5 favorite NES games of all time. So take it away.
All right. So number 5 on my list is actually going by movies. This was the thing back then because it was based upon 4 characters and a teacher. And I think that you'll know what I'm talking about when I say to you that my number 5 was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, of course.
Man, when that game came out, it was literally a Turtle Mania world. The movie had just come out, I believe, and no, was it the movie that came out? Because
the movie came out in '89. But my question to you is, was it the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game or the Turtles arcade game you're talking about? Because they were two different things.
I believe it was the it was the one that you could play on the NES.
You could play both on the NES, but you talking the one where it was the 4 turtles and they would get captured if you died, so to speak. It had the water level that was super hard.
The one I recall is that you can go under the sewer.
That's the original. That's the original.
That's the one I'm talking about.
With the pizzas to recharge your energy.
Right, exactly. That's the one. Yes.
Yeah.
That game, I remember when that game came out. I don't know. I don't think the movie came out yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was the TV show is what caused the rage, of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And TMNT with the TV show and then releasing, the game at the same time. I remember I got the game the day of, and my brother and I, literally, my father yelled at me because basically, my brother's 8 years younger than me, and he stayed up until midnight that night playing that game with me. And nice. My father yelled at me like you would not believe, because, he's like, how in the world can you have at the time I was 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
How could you have a 5-year-old kid? I was like, how can you have a 5-year-old kid stay up till midnight? Oh, he screamed at me. But my brother at that time loved that game. And even he could figure it out to play some of it and stuff. And it gave me good, fond memories of just my little brother there. And then I played it with you when I came over your house because fans lived across the street. So, and that was just still my favorite character in that entire game was Michelangelo.
Yeah, Michelangelo's weapon was really good because the nunchuck would kind of stick out far.
Right.
I was more of a fan of Donatello. I love the quarterstaff.
Now, funny thing is,
it was the bow.
The bow, yeah. Because in real life, meaning that when you watch the television show or just as a martial artist, my favorite weapon of the 4 was the bow. I just felt like it was just something about that,
mm-hmm.
And that was just one heck of a game, man. For those of you who have never played this game, please try to seek it out. It is awesome. Awesome. Okay, number 4. This is a classic. Once again, it is something that even I think till this day, if you have this new generation play it, I think that they would get a kick out of it. Maybe not the way that we did, but I'm talking about Ninja Gaiden.
Oh, Ninja Gaiden. I always say Gaiden, whichever way you say it.
I mean, that was one of those games where it was just, I can't even explain how awesome it is. Now, there is a arcade game version, am I correct?
Of Ninja, yes, I believe there was, yeah.
I like the arcade game just a small tad bit more,
mm-hmm.
but I like playing it on Nintendo better as well.
Just because you had it at home.
Right. It was just, exactly. I could play it whenever I wanted to. I have to wait on that quarter list and stuff like that. I kind of felt like Ninja Gaiden or Gaiden, it was one of those things where the graphics were really good. It was difficult, but not difficult to the degree where you would actually sit there and go, oh, God, I'm going to smash this TV in front of me and throw the controller. My favorite thing was to use the star. Remember the star that went really far?
Yes.
And then, but then you had your katana in real life is the most lethal weapon that possible, but it was also the weakest weapon
mm-hmm.
in the arsenal. But yet your stars and the other little, accessories that you carried with you was what really made the game. So that to me was just like, oh man, that was the game back then. Now,
I used to love jumping and sticking to the wall. Remember how you would jump back and forth on the wall?
Right,
it was really cool.
In which, by the way, is a real life ninja technique. they used claws on their palms.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's how ninjas would go through trees and things like that. Yep. So I'm glad that whoever created that game actually really did some research. You know, so it's not some far-fetched thing where the guy's like jumping up 30 feet.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah,
so
no,
I like
very
that.
true. Cool. Very cool.
Number 3, you will never believe.
Uh-oh.
You will never believe number 3. You ready for this one?
I'm excited.
Lethal Enforcers.
Was Lethal Enforcers on the NES?
I believe so because it was a bundle from what I gather. It was a bundle. And you had a blue gun and a pink gun.
Yeah.
And I believe that
I gotta look that up because I don't remember that
now
on the NES.
was that for Super NES or was that for
It
NES?
might have been
Because
Super NES.
I could have sworn that
I could be
was
wrong.
an NES game.
I will tell you in a second.
Please do.
Lethal Enforcers was for Super Nintendo.
Oh, for Super Nintendo. Ah, damn it. All right.
Dude, your number 3 has been tainted.
It has been tainted.
But you know what? No. You know what? You had an 11 and 12. Everything just shifts up one, and we're all good.
Okay. All right. I like that. But,
so let's. That's
right.
okay, dude. That was a great game, and if we do a Super Nintendo list, we can bring that one back. But meanwhile, let's jump up to your number 2.
Number 2. If this is not on the list, we have a major problem with the NES. How could you say no to Super Mario Brothers?
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Now, okay, can I ask you something? And I'm curious to know if you have an opinion on this. Larry is ultra adamant about about the young people calling this today Super Mario Bros. Are you on that same bandwagon as well?
No,
He's angry at people calling it Super Mario Bros. When it's really Super Mario Brothers.
Well, no. It should be called Super Mario Brothers. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. Because that's what it's always been called. Now, granted, you got to remember, today's generation, they see BROS period and they think bros. They don't think brothers. But we grew up with it as Super Mario Brothers. I believe it should always be called Super Mario Brothers.
Well, also to the young generation out there who do listen to and watch this podcast, a bro, technically by the book is, and don't ask me what book, but technically anybody could be a bro. Like you could literally just go up to a friend and just say, "Hey, what's up, bro? What's going on?" You know. So but a brother is actually somebody who's family related. So it's a complete. Right. So I understand. I agree with Larry's point when it's Super Mario Brothers, not bros.
Yeah, it is because Mario and Luigi are brothers, and on top of that, there's a period after the S, which means it's, you know what I mean? It's a shortened version of a longer word. Right. If it was just bros, there would be no period after it. So it actually is brothers.
Right, exactly.
But anyway, the game itself.
Right. The game itself, my favorite person to play on that game is not Mario. I actually kind of despise using him. My man Luigi. I like Luigi. And you know, why? Because I have this theory. No, I just have this theory that he jumps higher.
Luigi jumped higher in Super Mario Brothers 2, not in Mario 1. In the original Mario, it was the same character. All they did was change the colors.
Wait a minute. Remember when you were jumping for the flag?
Yeah.
Wasn't it Luigi who could jump higher for the flag than Mario can because Mario is fat?
No, they did not.
Really?
No, not in the original game. No,
okay.
They were the same. Because it was a simplistic 8-bit game. It was basically the same character. They just changed the colors and adjusted them slightly. So Mario and Luigi were basically interchangeable. But obviously, what?
Can you imagine in the Nintendo quarters and the headquarters in the 1980s for the creative division when they had to come up with two people that they had to put on a game of Super Mario Brothers, and someone in that creative division who's Japanese decided to come up with two Italian guys, okay, who were painters, all right, and gee, they couldn't come up with two of different nationalities, that they had to come up with two Italian guys. It's just like, I just wanted to know, what was the creative, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, what was the creative process behind that, of how could they can come up with something like that specific?
Well, you also have to remember that there was a Mario Brothers game before Super Mario Brothers, remember?
Oh, I understand that. Absolutely. I'm just saying, like, how does one come up with a creative process to create a character with that much depth?
You basically ask, Shinjiro Miyamoto, because he's the one who made it. But again, to your point, Super Mario Brothers, one of the greatest platformers ever created, if not the greatest platformer ever created in video game history. Amazing side-scroll game. 32 levels that were super difficult, so difficult that they had warp zones. Remember when you found the warp zones to get through them?
Yep. It took me a year to beat that game, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very challenging game. And to be honest with you, I don't remember if I ever beat it all the way through without using a warp zone. I don't think I ever played it straight through.
And it was also it was a very challenging game. At the same time, it was a very fun game.
Right? Oh yeah, it was great, and it was also a cool 2-player game, because you would alternate between the other person who had the second controller. So if you had a sibling, you could take turns. It was really fun. I mean, by far, and obviously the iconic characters of Mario, Bowser, Toad, and Peach.
King Koopa.
King Koopa, yeah, who later became Bowser.
Oh, okay, yeah. It was just awesome, man. Oh.
Yeah, synonymous with that game is the phrase that people quote all the time. Sorry, but the princess is in another castle.
Yeah,
that's been used and abused for over 30 years.
I'm gonna do that with my next date.
Yeah, sorry, but your princess is in another castle.
Yeah,
nice.
I like that. I like that.
It's a good way to let her down if you don't want to be.
My next failed date is Sorry,
sorry, my princess is in another castle later. All right, that was your number 2. What was your number 1 game, man? What was number 1? What tops the list?
Game is Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Of course. Yeah,
that was the game, man.
You know what's interesting that did not make your list and did not make mine? I didn't get to my top 5, but neither of us put it on the list. And it was a game we both loved to play, also an arcade game, Kung Fu.
I
loved Kung Fu.
You're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. And come to think of it now, I kind of look at myself and say, whoa. For a guy who's like a martial art fanatic, I'm surprised that I didn't put that game in there. The game did not cross my mind, believe it or not. But that game was completely inspired by Bruce Lee's Game of Death, where he had to go up to different levels of the pagoda. The guy was dressed as a kung fu guy, which is pretty awesome. And it was just like, man, that was an awesome game. I'm really surprised as well. Yeah.
All right, but so for you, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is the be-all, end-all, the best game made on the NES on your list.
Absolutely. That is, for me, the be-all and all, yes.
All right, cool. We're going to switch back to me. I'm going to give my top 5.
Please.
Based on your top 5, I've only got one of those games in it. Just one of the top 5.
Really?
Yep, because remember, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out on my list came in at number 8. All right, so I'm going to go to my number 5. Number 5, it's a Capcom game, also part of a franchise. I had to pick my favorite one out of the group to put in here. No question about it. Mega Man 2 was one of the best games I ever played, hands down on it. So challenging, so much fun, great concept, great story, and it leaps and bounds superior to the original Mega Man game. There's so many cool things about it. Just the whole concept of defeating these robots and then taking their powers on so you can use them. Brilliant concept. And not only that, Mega Man it's been a game that it's been a franchise that has existed now for over 30 years. I mean, they just recently came out with Mega Man 11, which went back to the old 8-bit roots. So yeah. So Mega Man, because they had stopped at Mega Man, I think 7. I think they stopped at 7. And then Mega Man X came out on Super Nintendo and stuff. They tried Mega Man 64. But then on Xbox 360 and stuff, on the Virtual Console, 8, 9, 10, and 11 have come out, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
your fan base is going to probably fall off their chairs laughing when they hear that I did not realize that they made anything past Mega Man 3.
Oh wow, yeah, you're off. And speaking of off, your camera went up a little bit. You're falling out of my screen.
I think so.
You want everybody to see you. There you go. All right. So yeah, definitely Mega Man 2 was by far my favorite Mega Man of the Mega Man game of the franchise. So that stuck in at number 5. Number 4 for me, and Larry's gonna hate this for number 4 because one of the best series in my book ever created was the Castlevania series. And again, gothic horror themed. The whole idea is to ultimately stop Dracula by going through all of his other monsters in the original Castlevania. However, for me, the one I remember the most playing as a kid, and my favorite one, is the one that Larry hates the most, which is Castlevania 2. And what I liked about Castlevania 2 was it was more, it almost felt a little more RPG-ish to me, because you would have to run around upgrading your whips, going through the broken down castles to get Dracula's body parts so you can reassemble him and destroy him for good.
Isn't that where the Nightmare on Elm Street game came from? The premise of that?
No, that was well, I guess you can say the concept is a little bit similar, yes. But I just loved, I don't know, there was something about the concept of it that worked for me. There are definitely tedious elements to it, like running around collecting hearts. When it switches from day to night, it's super slow. I was like, right. But for me, I remember that one more fondly than the original Castlevania and Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse growing up. I used to replay it all the time. And it was, to me by far, like, and again, it's probably one of the most controversial of the Castlevania games.
Why?
Because a lot of people didn't like the way it changed, because the original Castlevania had stages that you went through. So it's like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 was very linear, whereas Castlevania 2 was more open world, almost like Metroid, where you traveled around to different towns. You interacted with people. You bought items that you needed to use in other locations. It was that type of game, and I think a lot of people didn't like the fact that it veered away. Yeah, a lot of people didn't like the fact that it veered away. Yeah, no. For me, it was just super fun. All right. Number 3, which we already talked about because you had it at number 2, Super Mario Brothers. So we won't get into that one again. Okay. However, it was a toss-up for me between Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers 3, because the third game kind of took what was great about the first game and built on it. You know, you had so many different powers with the leaf and all these other things that you can use, the whistle to warp and stuff. So much more in terms of levels. But for me, I'm always going to go back to the OG Super Mario Brothers. To me, that is the most memorable of the bunch.
There you go. All right.
Number 2, a game that I still play to this day. No matter what variation they have, I'll go back to the original and I'll play the current one. I'm currently playing the current version of this on the Switch. One of the best puzzle games, if not the best puzzle game ever created.
Oh, I think I have a feeling of what you're going to say.
And with some of the most memorable music, because I can never get the tune out of my head. Tetris.
Yes, I knew it.
Tetris is number 2 on my list for all of those.
Oh, man.
As a kid, it was probably the one game that brought my entire family together in the living room, because we would all take turns. We would all take turns playing Tetris, and nobody can beat me. My mom couldn't beat me. My dad couldn't beat me. My sister couldn't beat me. I was the Tetris champion in the house by far. Because once you got to level 9 in that game and the pieces came down super fast, you had to have lightning quick reflexes to get that sucker done. If I remember correctly, the highest level I hit, I think, was 18. Which is insane.
Oh, man. My highest level was like about 14 or 15, which is still pretty nuts.
Which is amazing. I mean, because those things come down fast. And on the Switch today now, they have Tetris 99, where you play against 98 other people online. It's a fantastic game. But the original Tetris on the NES, got to give it to it. I mean, granted, I want to say it came out on the Game Boy before the NES, if I'm not mistaken. No, I think it came out on the NES first. I'm sorry. Tetris came out. Tetris was a launch title with the Game Boy. It came with the Game Boy. But Tetris, by far and away, one of my favorite puzzle games, if not my favorite puzzle game of all time. Now leads me to number 1. This should be no surprise to anybody who knows me, no surprise to anybody who listens to this podcast. I cannot talk about this franchise enough, and this is where it all started. Nothing will ever top The Legend of Zelda for me on the NES.
See,
Don't
I know
disparage Zelda.
I know exactly what you're saying. Oh, I'm not going to. I mean, I know what you're saying. There's a ton of Zelda fans. It's a massive following. I gotta be honest with you. I've always watched you play it. I've played it once in my life. Once, okay? I've never gotten into it.
Hey.
So, I mean, let me ask you this. I mean, as a fan of it, I know you still play it. I know you still love it. What is it about this game that makes it the begin all end all for you that you love about so much?
You know, for me, at least in the beginning with that first game, it was the adventure. It was the fantasy element. It just had it had an epic quality to it. The whole open world where you got to explore and kill all these various creatures. You got to collect all these different items. And then all of the dungeons were different in their own way. Okay. Again, with different bosses at the end of it, you collected different items that you had to use. And I love the synergy of everything because every item that you collected had to be used somewhere else in order to move the game forward. So, you know, you needed the whistle from level 5 to get access to level 7. You needed to collect all the extra hearts on the board to get to 12 hearts, or to get to 5 hearts if you wanted the white sword. You needed 12 hearts to get the master sword. Like everything had a payoff to it, which led to the ultimate showdown with Ganon at the end of the game. And, you know, again, it was a very simple concept. Princess in peril. You had to collect the Triforce because Ganon was going to use the Triforce of power to destroy Hyrule. That was the thing, to rule and destroy Hyrule. So it was up to you to take up the sword and to defeat him. And just every part of that, when you add it all together, to me, made the most memorable game of my childhood.
Well, when you think about Zelda today, I mean, it's still referenced in a lot of like films, a lot of social media.
But they still make games.
Yeah, they still make games for it. There's a lot of cosplayers who cosplay as Zelda. You also have the idea that, you know, it's a legend. It's basically
a legend of Zelda.
It's a legendary game called The Legend of Zelda, and it's also, you can say that if basically Nintendo ever had to put out a representative or a band of representatives to show like they're one of their greatest accomplishments, Legend of Zelda has to be there. It has to be.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you know?
Mario and Link are basically synonymous with Nintendo. I mean, I can't think of two more iconic characters that they have in their library. When I think of Nintendo, Donkey Kong's definitely up there, but when I think of their library, Mario and Zelda are by far the top two. You know, I mean, Mario is more well known around the world, I think, than Link is. And I'm like, but those are the two.
Those are the two faces. Absolutely.
Those are the two faces of Nintendo for me, and I think for a lot of people. You have all these other characters too. You have your Simon Belmont, you have your Luigi, your Mega Mans, and all that stuff. But to me, Mario and Link, those are the be-all, end-all. And Legend of Zelda definitely deserves the number one in my list. As you can see over my shoulder, you see a piece of artwork with Link on it. You can't see all of it, but and I've collected so many Zelda items over the years. The hardcover books, the figures, the little plushies from all the different.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's it for me. So that is number one on my list. Those are my top 10 games. And your top 10 list was definitely impressive.
Thank you, sir.
I love the fact that we had so many games that were different. We only had 2 repeats: Super Mario and Punch-Out. Everything else was different.
Exactly.
And again, for everybody who's listening and watching, we would love to hear from you when this episode drops. Drop a comment on Facebook. Let us know what your top 10 NES games were, or just, if you have a couple of favorites. Do you agree with our list? Do you disagree with our list? I'm sure there are going to be some different things on yours. We'd love to hear from you guys. And thank you so much for being on the show this week. Tell our listeners where they can find you at the Yin and Yang Podcast.
So please email us. Listen to I think we're up to episode 95 right now. We're rapidly approaching episode 100.
Nice.
That's if Larry will stop. Will actually make the time to get on board because didn't do a recording this week. I couldn't find a backup co-host, and I know that you're recovering. You're doing your thing. Or else, actually, I would have gotten you on to talk about martial art video games.
I appreciate that. I'm always willing to join you when I can.
I appreciate it, man. And then so we're doing that, and you can find us at our Facebook page. Just type in on Facebook Yin and Yang Podcast. And also you can email us at yin and yang podcast at gmail.com. Once again, that's yin and yang podcast at gmail.com. We drop every Friday. Our home base is Spreaker, of course, but we're found every single place you can get your hands on podcasts. Podcast Addict. We're on Spreaker, iTunes. Well, no, there's no more iTunes, right? But I'm saying like
Apple Music or Apple.
There you go. Apple Music, iHeartRadio, believe it or not. Yep, absolutely. So please give us a listen. Tell us what you think. And I've always said that the show is a podcast of the people. So I always listen to, what people have to say and to give us some creative direction. We would really appreciate that. And before you go, one quick thing. Behind you is the poster for the Friday the 13th video game. Am I correct?
Yes, it is.
It says it's a little bit blurry where I'm at here. It says
yes.
Destroy Jason what?
If you can.
Oh, if you can. Oh, okay. I didn't
Destroy Jason if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, big fan of horror movies. I saw that at a convention and I had to pick it. I started at this comic book store near me and I picked it up because I
You ever beat it?
Cool. Oh yeah, many times.
Have you?
Many times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But
it is an absolute honor to be here with you once again on the Retro Gamers.
Well, thank you very much for having, for having the time and taking the time to join me since Larry couldn't be here. And for the Retro Gamers, you can listen to us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can check us out on our Facebook page, Instagram at Retro Gamers Podcast. You can email us at email@theretrogamers.com. You can also watch us on YouTube. Just look for the Retro Gamers Podcast. And this has been an awesome week. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody who listens and watches to us, and we will catch you right here next week on the Retro Gamers Podcast.